we don't expand our imagination,
justification for being what you are.
And welcome to Washington Unplugged. Bob Schieffer here. Well, this controversy is growing over the potential mosque at Ground Zero in New York City. President Obama said Friday that Muslims had a right to build a place of worship and a community center on private property in Lower Manhattan, pleasing and angering both sides of the political spectrum. We're going to talk about it this morning because that's what everybody in politics is talking about it today. And joining us, the Marcs. Marc Ambinder, who I would also say, congratulations, Marc, the new White House correspondent for National Journal, where he's been working for a long time, has an important new assignment. And our own White House correspondent, Marc Knoller, who is with the president. And Marc, where are you today?
We're in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, Bob. President Obama just visited the ZBB Energy Company. It's a company that makes advanced technology batteries. He gave a speech, and this company got $1.3 million from the Recovery Act stimulus bill to help it expand and keep workers on the job.
We were just talking here, Marc. He seems to favor going to battery companies. Is there anything to be read into that?
Very much so. President Obama has put a great deal of emphasis on clean energy programs, and he said again today that his commitment to clean energy, he believes, will lead the economy to create more than 800,000 jobs by the year 2012.
Well, and we cannot overlook the opportunity to say we hope everyone gets a charge out of that. So, but first we want to talk about this thing going on with the mosque. Yesterday on Face the Nation, Republican strategist Ed Rollins told me that now every candidate who's being challenged running for Congress is going to be asked the question, how do you feel about building the mosque on Ground Zero sites? Well, how is that going to affect the upcoming races? Marc Ambinder, I hear a lot of Democrats saying, I think the president had the right idea and made the right statement intellectually, but gosh, I kind of wish he'd have put it off for a while because by making this comment, he did elevate it to a national issue when before it was something of a national issue or a local issue in New York.
It elevated it even to an international issue now. The entire world is going to be looking at the way America debates this issue. There's no question he elevates it into the realm of political combat in a midterm year. And Ed Rollins is right. Just this morning, Sharon Angle, who is Harry Reid's opponent, urged him to break his silence on the Ground Zero mosque. Now, arguably, Harry Reid has no business, who's a senator from Nevada, talking about a mosque that's going to be built in Ground Zero. But now, because the President of the United States has legitimized it as an issue, every candidate's going to have to weigh in on it. And given the you can say the tincture of the electorate this year, Democrats are going to have a harder time doing that than Republicans.
I talked to some folks at the White House last night about this, and I said, why did the president choose to do it and do it at this time? He pointed out, of course, that this outreach to Muslims, and this is absolutely correct, began with George Bush after 9/11, when the president instructed all of his ambassadors around the world to reach out to Muslims, to explain to them that our argument was with the terrorists, and the people we had a problem with were the terrorists, not with the Muslim religion. But I also heard a lot of people in politics saying last night, yes, the president says, and this is the White House view apparently, if you do the right thing, the politics will take care of itself. But there are a lot of candidates who are not necessarily agreeing with that right now on the Democratic side.
On the Democratic side, and look, I mean, if you're a Republican strategist, you get paid to look for events that happen and do your best to exploit them and gin them up, and nothing makes it easier for you than the president laying out a clear position that's easy for you to urge your candidate to say something against. And let's be clear, since 9/11, it has become increasingly acceptable within our discourse to express anxiety about Islam. And in many ways, that's almost a legitimate point of view among some on the Republican side of the aisle. And from the president's perspective, the last thing that we want to project as Americans is that we're at war with Islam. And that's the assumption that Osama bin Laden has, that the U.S. Western values fundamentally at war with Islam. So you can understand from the perspective of even foreign policy why the president would want to say it is our position that Islam and Western values are in lockstep. But the American people aren't there yet. It's been 10 years, which is a long time, but in New York, it's not a long time. It's not enough time. And that's where the anxiety is coming from. And if you're a political strategist, you can take that and you can exploit it, which is what politicians like Sarah Palin are doing, which is basically what Ed Rollins is suggesting to other politicians. That's why it's an issue. Ed
Rollins said yesterday, this is the dumbest thing that any president or presidential candidate has said since Michael Dukakis said it's a good thing to burn the flag or something to that effect. And well, Marc Knoller out there with the president. Has any of this come up today on out on the campaign trail? Because the other reality right now is campaign 2012 is already underway. I mean, President Obama is on a campaign trip this week.
Indeed it is. Bob, the issue of the mosque only came up when reporters asked spokesman Bill Burton about it and see if there was some new angle to this 4 days after he made his initial statement. What Burton says is the president believed it was his obligation to speak out about the mosque issue because there was a constitutional issue involved, freedom of religion. President Obama said Friday evening to that Ramadan dinner at the White House that he felt there could be no one to stop Muslims in America from building a mosque on their own private property where they wanted to build it. But then one day later, when he responded to a question, he said that he was not commenting on the wisdom of making a decision to put a mosque there. So it seemed like he was recalibrating, even backpedaling a little bit, although the White House was adamant in saying there was no recalibration at all, no stepping back from what the president said. But the two statements certainly are not mutually inclusive. And today, you're right, Bob, the president is on a big fundraising swing. He is on a 3-day cross-country trip, taking him to 5 states, in which he'll be doing 6 political fundraisers for Democrats. Today in Wisconsin, he's doing one here for the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, Tom Barrett. And Bob, this evening in Los Angeles, he's doing an even bigger event for the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. The event is co-hosted by Hollywood celebrities Steven Spielberg and Barbra Streisand. It's being held at the home of John Wells, the TV producer responsible for the West Wing TV series. And a ticket to the event ranges from a low of $2,500 that gets you into a reception to $30,400 that gets you a picture taken with the president.
All right, well, I hope it's a good picture. That's a pretty good price. Marc and the two Marcs, Marc and Ambinder here. I want to go back to what Marc Knoller just talked about, because yesterday there did seem to be a recalibration. He said, well, yes, they have a right to build it, but I didn't comment on the wisdom of it.
Which suggests that the president has a different view, perhaps, about what the wisdom is, which people want to know what that view is now. So I don't think the story is going to go away until he gives some hint as to what his view on the wisdom is.
I also think that is not going to please some of his more liberal supporters who have been worried lately about is this president really ideological enough? Is he a believer, or is he a pragmatist who's just trying to navigate maybe a third way or something? I don't think the president helped himself by saying that yesterday. I mean, just from a political standpoint would be my analysis. What would yours be?
The president's political base sees this issue fundamentally as one of Muslims being marginalized in the U.S., and they think the president should speak out for the marginalized, as he has done and as he did throughout his career. And when he doesn't do this, they see him essentially as capitulating to the political winds of the time, which they see coming from the right, coming from the Republican media ecosphere. And particularly when he's not clear about something. If he were to make a clear statement, I think it would be different than him equivocating, because the worst thing here is his equivocation, because it prolongs the story. And it makes it look as if the president is making political calculations instead of speaking on principle.
I thought one of the most interesting things that one of the president's supporters, and actually one of the strategists, said to me last night was, look, this is something that's going to go on for a week or so. It's summertime, but you know and I know that in the end, this election is going to be decided by the economy. It's going to be a pocketbook issue. But you have to say, and you don't have to be very smart to know, that with the economy in the shape it's in, a lot of these candidates are saying, look, we need all the help we can get because it's going to be hard enough trying to defend the shape the economy's in right now.
Yeah, there's no question. And there is also, I would say, even a more pernicious edge to this, which is that the president, by even making the comments that he did on Friday, will confirm the beliefs of some that his values are not American values. He's in some sense playing into that stereotype without really providing any sustenance or fodder for liberals who also need to be enthused and need to be energized for the election, who can say, well, at least the president is really strongly defending principles. The president doesn't have to weigh on every constitutional issue. I don't know if I would be surprised if Bill Burton actually believed that spin this morning. I mean, there are a zillion constitutional issues that the president doesn't weigh in on. There's a reason why he weighed in on this. You just wonder, why didn't he stop at what he said? And why didn't he make a more full and complete statement on principle, if that's what he intended to do?
Do you think that this will carry over into the elections in November?
Probably not. I think the economy will be the hinge point for most of these local races. And I think in the short term, look, in the August recess, we don't have health care to kick around like we had last year. So anything like this is going to fill space. It's going to fill some space. I don't think it's ultimately going to hurt too many candidates in the end. But I do think it raises a larger question about the president's commitment to core progressive values that liberals in particular really want to have answered before the election.
All right, we want to wrap this, but Marc Knoller, any final thoughts? My guess is we will not hear the president comment on this, at least for a while. My guess is that the last thing the White House would like to do right now is put a new lead on this story, put a new top on it that will carry it into the next few days. What's your take out there?
Oh, well, there's no indication the White House wants the story to continue. It got a little embarrassed by it because it looked as though President Obama was trying to be on both sides of the issue. Friday night telling Muslims at the White House, you have the right to build your mosque in New York City, but then a day later saying, well, I wasn't saying whether it was a good idea or not for them to build it 2 blocks from ground zero. It's the kind of thing that, remember President Bush said about John Kerry, he was for it before he was against it. They could say that about the president in the New York City mosque as well. It might be an issue if he were on the ballot somewhere this year. Of course, he's not. So Marc is right that it'll probably die down in a little while, but it's certainly an issue now, but it's not something the president wants to keep going.
All right. Well, I want to thank both the Marcs for a very interesting and lively discussion this morning. Here's a question. Whatever happened to all those young voters? There is a crop of young candidates running this year in the midterms, but are young people going to make it to the polls come November? Heather Smith, who's the executive director of Rock the Vote, is joining me now to talk about that. And Heather, a lot of people are saying, these young voters, and we had a record turnout of them in 2008, but they haven't shown up. But the other part of that story is they don't show up at midterms as a general rule. But what's the outlook now?
Yeah, well, as we hit the midterm election cycle, the story keeps coming back, right? Young voters versus older voters. Will young people turn out? And, we've heard that story now since they won the right to vote, right? 1972. Mm-hmm. And I actually think this time the story is a little bit different and we're missing it. Young people have never turned out at the same rates as older voters. But when their turnout goes up just a little bit, it can have a major impact on the outcome of the election and, honestly, on the direction of our country and our democracy. So in 2008, for example, you saw turnout go up to 51, 52% for young people. That was a 2-point increase in turnout compared to the last presidential. That put millions of new people.
That was considered a big deal.
And it was a 2%. Huge deal. Look at look at the impact that had. Uh-huh. If you look at the 2006 races, about 25% of voters under 30 cast a ballot. If that number goes up to 26, 27, 28, that's millions and millions of new voters in the electorate that can certainly make a difference this coming election cycle.
So what are you doing? I mean, your Rock the Vote campaign is designed to get young people to turn out. What are you doing this year? What worked in 2008? And what are you going to put emphasis on this time out?
Yeah, so these young voters are different than older voters. There's a reason they don't turn out at the same rates. They are new to the political process. In fact, there's about 9 million new voters who are eligible to vote this cycle who weren't even eligible in 2008, and they need to be registered. So that's an additional hurdle for them, and that's something that we focus a lot on. They're also very mobile, so about a third of them will have moved since the last election, and they need to be re-registered. So we're focusing a lot of our effort on reaching those tens of millions of newly eligible or voters who need to be re-registered so that they can be turned out. And what we saw work in 08, we also saw work in 06 and 04, was that if we can get them registered and on the rolls, and the candidates reach out and speak to them directly, make them feel like the elections are about them and relevant to their own lives, turnout goes up. But if we don't invest in those strategies, whether it's registration or campaigning to young people, it won't. So we're running our largest voter registration drive in a midterm election ever. We've set a goal of 200,000 young voters on the rolls. And if we invest in that in certain areas and candidates do the same, I think you'll see turnout go up even a couple percentage points, and that's what will really matter.
I don't mean to sound like a civics teacher here, but if you were to say to a young person, the most important reason for you to vote is, what would the answer to that be?
I think that's up to young people themselves, but if you ask them, they'll tell you the same thing that older voters tell you. They'll say it's about the economy, it's about jobs. We talk about jobs as a political issue in the midterm. Well, these young voters are unemployed at rates that far exceed older voters. In fact, the rate of unemployment for teenagers who are entering the workforce is at the highest level it's ever been since the Bureau of Labor Statistics started tracking it. It is about affording college. It is about paying off debt. And it's about the issues that they face in their everyday lives. But I also think they have an eye towards the future. They want to have a role in shaping the future of their country. And I don't know if you've ever done a registration drive in a classroom and someone's just turned 18 and you hand them the form and you explain the history and the voting and the right and the power that comes with that. And it's a rite of passage. And it's a really special moment for these young people if we take the time to reach out to them and talk to them about it.
Heather, thank you very much. And thank you
Bob.
for what you do. I think it's a very important thing. Heather Smith
you.
of the Rock the Vote campaign. Well, thank you for watching Washington Unplugged. I hope you'll be right here tomorrow, every day on CBSNews.com. Tomorrow, CBS News' Jan Crawford and the New York Times' Jeff Zeleny will be here for tomorrow's webcast. I'm Bob Schieffer. I hope you have a really good day.